billowing out of the landing ship, Sir Galahad, and then the first signs of a fire aboard St. Tristram nearby. The attack happened so fast, there wasn't even time to think of taking cover. And as the ships were hit, many men aboard hadn't even time to pull on their anti-burn masks to save themselves from the heat flash as the bombs exploded. The two landing ships, Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram, were bombed within 200 yards of each other as they were unloading supplies of ammunition and of men. The bombs hit Sir Galahad aft through the engine room and accommodation sections. I watched from the shore less than 400 yards away and felt the impact on the ground below me as the hold full of ammunition exploded. Many were brought ashore with dreadful burns.
Hey, you must spread down, that's the nail. Well, pin out a bit.
Bullets came from their ammunition boxes, exploding in the heat, whistling and whirring past us.
The brutal reality of war made a deep impression on Mrs. Thatcher.
To have the kind of blow that the Welsh Guards took at Bluffco was a pretty awful thing. But you see, you are leader of the nation. You have to show tremendous reserves of fortitude in these circumstances. And there's no good going to pieces. That won't do anybody any good, least of all the survivors. So you have, some people will say you have to put on a front. But you have to demonstrate that you are a leader in these circumstances, because that's what you are.
In the days that followed, a military bombardment of Argentinian positions prepared the way for the final push for Port Stanley.
From the Two Sisters, the Royal Marines threaded their way carefully down the pass, but the route was blocked by minefields, and every few minutes the column dragged to a halt as the way was carefully cleared.
Once the military campaign started to roll, it was out of our hands. Then it was a question where our soldiers, better than theirs, could they prevail, and of course they did. But we were, to an extent, from that moment, once the campaign really started to roll, we were getting reports rather than influencing events at all.
On the 14th of June, the Argentines surrendered. White flags were flying over Port Stanley.
It was, I think, a very considerable feat of arms to go all that way, 8,000 miles, and defeat a power which had, a navy of its own, had an air force of its own, all the rest of it. So I think in military terms, it was perhaps a little bit kind of nostalgic, but it was nonetheless a considerable achievement.
That evening, back in London, Margaret Thatcher went to the House of Commons and, on a point of order, announced the victory. Cheers resounded throughout the House, and outside in Whitehall and Downing Street, the crowds greeted Mrs. Thatcher as the conquering hero.
She always had this Joan of Arc capacity to know that what she was doing was right, and I don't think that she probably doubted for a moment that it was going to come out successfully in the end. I think she must have known that she had a lot more windier colleagues who were much more apprehensive, but I think that she obviously did feel vindicated when it was all over.
Within days of the Argentine surrender, General Galtieri and his military junta were removed from power. Democracy was restored to Argentina in 1983.
There had always been quite a close sort of Anglo-Argentine relationship, and I don't think it devastated it. Obviously, there were people who were grateful to Thatcher for the overthrow of the dictatorship, and a lot of people lost their lives, disappeared ones and all that, and without, I think, our defence of the Falklands, the junta would not have been overthrown. So there may be even people in the Argentine who actually are grateful for what we did.
When on the 21st of July the aircraft carrier HMS Hermes arrived back home, laden with troops and helicopters, Mrs. Thatcher was the first to greet them. In congratulating all on board on their triumph, she was celebrating her own.
Oh, don't photograph me, that's a scoreboard, look at that, that's a scoreboard of achievement.
I think they recognise that they got a quite exceptional woman here. I think they realised it, or were beginning to realise it, before the Falklands. notwithstanding the huge increase in unemployment, but I think they were beginning to realise that there was something of exceptional quality in this woman. After the Falklands, they knew.
This is the most fantastic operation that we've undertaken. We're all very privileged to have taken part in it. And I couldn't have her coming in without coming to welcome her.
The public, too, was keen to celebrate the safe return of our boys.
There was just a feeling of admiration for the job that our troops and our airmen and sailors had done. I mean, to operate 8,500 miles from home with your nearest land base 4,500 miles away, and to be successful was an astonishing feat of arms, and people were hugely impressed by the professionalism and the skill and the bravery of our forces.
7 months after the war had ended, Mrs. Thatcher paid her own visit to the Falklands.
Oh, this is lovely. This is a typical house.
This is typical size.
Typical size house.
It was her first visit to the islands and an opportunity to meet the people for whom she had risked her political future and the lives of many British servicemen and women.
To maintain peace with freedom and justice is always expensive. It's less expensive than war, particularly in human life.
Might there be a time when we talk to the Argentines again?
No, not on sovereignty. One thing the islanders have made it perfectly clear. These islands are British. They are the Queen's loyal subjects. They wish it to stay that way.
The Falklands had a huge impact on Margaret Thatcher. She didn't become arrogant, but they gave a real boost to her self-confidence because, you know, she must have had her doubts. First woman Prime Minister, going to war, heading up a war cabinet. And she handled it, and she handled it brilliantly, and she came out of it with a lot of unlikely admirers, like virtually the whole of our forces.
Margaret Thatcher's popularity was at its height. Her triumph was the result of political nerve and enormous good luck. Her military success would later guarantee her a second term in office. But perhaps most significantly, it would increase Mrs. Thatcher's confidence in her own judgment, her own sense of being right. She was now unassailable. In the next programme, how Margaret Thatcher bestrode the world stage and the truth about that special relationship.